Hello, I'm Betty Swann, and welcome to our show, Wisdom in the Night, where you'll get help for the tough decisions in your life. Tonight I have a great guest. He's a licensed contractor, an Ironman triathlete, and he and his wife run a ministry for married couples. His name is Tim Aquino. Welcome to the show, Tim. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you, Betty.
You know, you're a very interesting man. I think that you've done a lot just in the intro, just hearing what all you've done. So tell me a little bit about your background.
Okay, we grew up, well, we used to live in the Philippines, and we moved to New York City in 2007. But prior to moving to the city, we were involved in, I grew up a Methodist. Our family was Methodist, and when I started my own family and started having kids, we moved from our church to another church, another Protestant church. Now, after serving in that church, we, in 2003, moved to Victory Christian Fellowship, which is part of the Every Nation Ministries worldwide church. And it was actually our daughter who led us to start attending in that church. And I think that was the year when my wife and I really started to be mentored and counseled by our pastors back in the Philippines.
It makes a big difference, doesn't it, to have somebody take an interest in you and teach you?
It does, it does. As a man, I think all men are stubborn when it comes to problems. We think that we can do it on our own and not need help from anybody. So when we actually started to sit down with this couple that was mentoring us, in my mind, I was thinking, why should I listen to you? Why should I follow your advice? I can do it. I can handle my own problems. But then I realized that really you cannot do it on your own. And God was patient enough to teach me that I needed somebody or some people to walk with.
Always, Tim. Even if you just go to church on Sunday, you discover that's not enough.
Correct.
To really walk with the Lord, it takes more. And you're hungry for more.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, so were you a building contractor in the Philippines?
Yes, I had my own business. I was a general contractor in the Philippines. My wife used to work for the Asian Development Bank, and our kids were in good schools in the Philippines. So when the time came to finally decide if we were going to move to the States or stay in the Philippines, we were praying about it and really just asking God for wisdom and guidance. But then when my family and I would sit down, my wife Tina and our children Sam and Josh would sit down and talk about it, the three of them would start crying because they didn't want to leave the Philippines.
Oh, that put a lot of pressure on you, didn't it?
It did. And by God's grace, we were living a comfortable life in the Philippines. Like I said, I had my business. Tina was in a good, had a great job. Our kids were in good schools, and we just were blessed. And
well, Tim, what made you want to move here? Why did you want to do that?
I was petitioned by my sister for citizenship back in 1981. And I totally forgot about that, got married, had kids, and in 2004, our papers came back. And we had to make a decision.
Oh, wow.
Whether to move or to stay in the Philippines and try to fulfill the requirements by just traveling every year to the States. But we prayed about it, like I said, and God was clear that He wanted us to move, and we wanted to obey.
So you're an immigrant.
Yes.
That's, I think, important for this show, because there's people watching this show right now that they're immigrants, and they're wondering, can I make it? How do I know to go? Did I make the right choice now that I'm here? It's hard or have challenges. So, yeah, well, that's great. Well, now, how did you get this close walk with the Lord yourself. Did you get that in the Philippines?
Yes, I think about around 2004. I think that's when I really had started to have a closer relationship with God and started to have lordship in my life.
In 2004?
Yes.
Well, and you moved to the States in what year?
2007.
Oh, wow, just 3 years later.
Yes. And actually, when we moved here to New York, I think all of us separately had a closer walk with God because we didn't have family in New York City. I have 3 siblings. I had 3 siblings in California. My wife had 7 siblings, I think, in California. And all of them were expecting us to move to California.
Mm-hmm.
But it was clear that God wanted us to move to New York City. So when we moved here, we didn't have family here. And
Big walk of faith, wasn't it?
yes, but God was very clear when He spoke to my wife. The words were, "You will not be shortchanged." And we just really relied on that word. And by God's grace, when we got here, we prayed that we will have 3 months first of vacation before we started working. And my wife prayed for that, and she did actually get the job after 3 months. But the 3 months we're traveling, visiting friends. We brought our son to Michigan State, and we just went on a lot of road trips. And myself, after 3 months, I got a job too.
What was it?
I started as a project manager for a general contractor. Now, being a general contractor in the Philippines, of course, my prayer was to be one here in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a lot to learn, and I couldn't just really start my own business right away. So I started working for companies as a construction project manager.
Mm-hmm.
And actually just this week, by God's grace, I just got my license.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you, God.
I bet it's hard. I bet it's difficult for here, right?
It is. It was 9 years in the making, Betty, and I could just really see God's hand moving. It was His timing. It was premature to do so earlier, and He just built my network, my connections. I actually worked for, this is a testimony because I worked for 5 general contractors, and I got fired 4 times.
Really?
And I just had to press on and just continue to believe God that He was doing something.
Well, you know, there's challenges in stepping out into the new world, which you did, challenges in stepping out in a new part of the United States, challenges in stepping out in the biggest city, the
Yes.
building going on all the time, and finding the right connections and the right people to work under, and then having that not work out. Is that right?
Yes.
What a challenge. How'd you conquer that?
Very good question. That it's only really by God's grace. In those 5 companies that I worked for, I had 4 not so good bosses. And I was asking God, looking back now, it's so clear that He had a purpose for every company that I worked for. Especially now for this last one, because this is where I met a designer who I now work with, and who is really becoming a good friend. And I met clients and connections, just built my network. And prior to this company, my wife was praying that I would start my business already and not work for this last company. But then I decided to work for this company. In December of 2014, I got laid off and started my own business in January of 2015.
And so it's a year and a half later, and you're now getting your certification, right?
Yes.
Your license.
Yes.
That's great. Did you have any other challenges moving to the U.S., not just counting work?
Yes, it was hard for my family, especially for my kids, because my son just graduated from high school when we moved to New York. That was in 2007. And not more than 2 weeks, we drove him to Michigan to bring him to school, to Michigan State, and left him there. So his was the biggest adjustment.
Mm-hmm. And he didn't have any friends there, did he?
No family, no friends.
Wow.
It's just really a totally new environment. Michigan can be gloomy.
Mm-hmm. The weather's kind of bad, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the sun is seldom comes out, always cold.
And that's completely opposite from the Philippines, right?
Yes, where it's always hot and humid.
So he kind of went through his own trials in making the adjustment that were pretty strong, pretty severe.
He did. He did. And
how about your daughter? Did she have troubles?
she did too. She studied at Springfield College in Massachusetts. And it was a school, actually my grandfather went to that school. And she started there in November of 2007. And the adjustments for her were, I think she was the only Asian at that time.
Mm-hmm. So the reason I'm asking these questions is that the people that are watching this show that are immigrants and are maybe discouraged, thinking, what's wrong with me? Why am I having so much difficulty getting going? Why isn't it working out fast enough? You're saying that you learned that God had timing and that by praying a great deal about it, it began to unfold at God's timetable?
Yes.
And that was better?
Yes, very clearly. And as I mentioned earlier, I could have started my own business earlier, way earlier, but then I wouldn't have the right connections. I would be at a point where I wouldn't know who to approach for projects. I don't know how the process is in New York City. There was so much to learn, and it was clear that it was God's timing and it was His hand leading me in regards to my business.
Now, so tell me a little bit about how in the world you became a triathlete, and I know you run a lot, right?
Yes, I do.
How many have you run? How many marathons?
Well, a standalone marathon I've only done once, the New York
Okay.
City Marathon. But I've done 4 Ironmans and 4 half Ironmans.
That's 8.
Well, it's you count it as 4 full and 5 halves. So
Okay.
4 halves, sorry.
4 halves, yeah. So what do you like about it?
The best thing about it is during training and even in racing, it's the time I get to spend with God.
Really?
Because I'm on the bike for 5 hours, 6 hours, and it's really just a lot of time to spend with God. And it was during my training for the first Ironman, which was the New York City Ironman in 2012. It was during my training that MarriageWorks.org, our not-for-profit organization for marriages, was birthed.
During that?
During my training,
How did that happen?
I was just praying to God, Lord, what do you want me to do? Because I was training I was training, yes, but then I was just thinking in my mind, there's something else that you want me to do.
You could feel it or what?
Yeah, I was just feeling led that I just felt it, that God had something else for me and for my wife to do. So I was really just praying, and like I said, you're on the bike several hours at a time. You're running, you're swimming, you're just by yourself. And it was a lot of time spending with God and being in communication with Him.
Now,
So,
are you going to keep doing that? Are you going to continue?
yes, I want to do it. I want to continue to do Ironmans. And like I said, it's really just the time I get to spend with God that's really very encouraging for me. Aside from that, of course, it's a healthy lifestyle.
You know, Tim, I always thought an Ironman type person would be big and muscular and tall, and you're a normal guy, and yet you have probably an incredible heart rate. You probably can bike for hours. What motivated you to even go into that?
It was a dream, I think, back in the Philippines, when you see the Kona Ironman World Championship on TV. In the back of your mind, you ask yourself, can I do that?
Really? Wow.
And then one day, and then it comes to a point where you tell yourself, someday, I want to do that.
And you just got started?
And then when we moved to New York City, that's when it started, actually, because back in the Philippines, I used to play a lot of basketball, and then it became badminton. And then when we moved here, it was not easy to look for places to play badminton.
Right.
So I told my wife, honey, let's buy a bike. Let's buy bicycles. And we started riding the bike. And I had this feeling in my heart, and I was thinking in my mind, maybe this could be a time to start to do triathlons.
Wow.
So
Does your wife do them too?
No, she does not. But
Anybody else in your family do it?
yes, my daughter does.
Oh,
Samantha.
wow.
Yes. She is also...
Do you do them together?
We've never done a race together.
Yeah.
But she also does it. And she's very competitive. My son is also athletic, but he is into soccer.
Wow. So you're just a very athletic family, right?
Yes, we're very active. I
Uh-huh.
think we got it. My family, all my siblings were very into sports. So I think that's where it came from.
Okay. And then out of that, you got this thought about doing a marriage ministry to help marriages. Now, what made you want to go that way?
Very good question. When we moved to New York City, we started attending church at Every Nation, New York City. It's a very young church.
Young people or
Yeah,
young?
young people, young people. And when we moved here, we were suddenly thrust into the ministry because we were one of the longest married couples in church. The Zungris were the longer married couple, and then us.
Now, how long have you been married?
We've been married for 30 years now.
Oh, gee. Not many people make that.
Thank you. So, yes, and then we were kind of put in that position to be in that ministry, and then that's where it started. We just saw that it was something that really God put into our hearts, and we love doing it. We were passionate about helping marriages and families.
So do you conduct conferences, or do you meet with people privately, or how do you do it?
Yes, we mentor couples. We also have spoken at marriage conferences. We lead small groups for couples and even single people. We've shared many times the Love and Respect material also of Dr. Emerson Eggerichs. And we are often approached by friends and even not people from outside of church for counseling and advice. And that's where it really became something that we love to do.
Well, Tim, what would you say, in your experience, are the greatest challenges in marriages today?
We are in a society that they call a fatherless society.
Fatherless?
Yes. There's a lot of children who are growing up in broken families. Now, also a challenge is we believe that we believe the Bible. And then the Bible says marriage is to be between a man and a woman. Now, these are the challenges now that we face because of the same-sex marriage, and then just seeing how many troubled children there are. Now, if we look at what's happening now, it really is, if you look at the statistics, many of these troubled people grew up in broken families, broken homes. Didn't have fathers in their household. And this is really what we want, we are praying about, for God to help us with, to really use us to reach out to people and help them in their marriages.
Because if they came from a broken home, they don't even know how to be a good husband or a good wife, right?
Yes.
They don't even know.
Yes.
Nobody's taught them. They haven't seen it.
Correct.
And do you see that that divorce pattern can run through a family, like start with maybe even the grandparents and the parents, and can be generational because of that?
Yes. It's, in some research I've seen that, for example, a single mother who got pregnant at 15 will have a child, a daughter. The daughter will then have the same situation happen to her, where early on she'll get pregnant and be a single mother. And now this becomes it's not a vicious cycle, but it goes on from generation to generation. Now, unless they are educated and given and are equipped to address their situation, it's just going to continue and continue.
Right. And so have you had special training you've taken in order to do this ministry?
I'm actually in school now,
Yeah?
taking up my master's in marriage and family therapy.
Oh, so you'll be a therapist,
I can be a licensed counselor, yes.
licensed counselor. Yes, uh-huh.
And it's really God that opened this for me. And it's for our ministry, most of all, just to be able to help people, because some of them will really need professional help. And right now, my wife and I are just mentors. And it is really just out of our obedience to God that we want to be in this ministry.
Right. So right now you're more like a mentor saying, this is what we've learned, this is what we've experienced, these are the books we've read, we'd recommend these.
Correct.
But with your training, what will you be able to do?
It will really allow us to, like I said, give professional advice because of being a licensed counselor.
Mm-hmm.
It will also allow us to reach families even outside of the church, which is our prayer, that we can bring people to know Christ,
Mm-hmm.
which is really what the main purpose is of what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. You know, Tim, you seem to have a lot of wisdom,
Thank you.
not just about marriage, but about being a man. What kind of wisdom would you give a man who is struggling in a marriage? Maybe he wants the marriage to continue, but his wife doesn't. Or maybe there's been so much trouble, it feels like there's no hope for it. What kind of advice would you give a man that's watching this show right now?
First thing I would say is to surround himself with people, with other men who will lift him up, who will encourage him, who will lead him to God. It's very important that we work hand in hand, walking our Christian walk with other people. And of course, it will be great for him to start reading the Bible, praying to God, but we understand that it just doesn't come easily for a lot of people, especially men. So it would be great if he can reach out and open up to somebody that he thinks will be a person that will give him good advice,
Mm-hmm.
a person who will pray for him, a person who will help him and just be there when he needs somebody.
Do you see that pornography has caused a lot of problems in marriages?
Yes, a lot of studies have shown that it can be a cause for a marriage to fail and for divorce to happen. And
for intimacy, maybe there's a problem to have true intimacy?
Yes, it greatly affects intimacy. It becomes a problem not only for the husband.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it also starts to be a problem for the wife and the kids. The wife would think that isn't our being intimate enough? And women tend to take it personally that, am I not good enough? So it starts,
Mm-hmm.
and it's something that the enemy uses to break the marriage. And it's something that we need to be aware of.
But
And
do you think it can be conquered?
it can, of course, by God's grace. I think it's the biggest struggle. It's the biggest fight that men fight.
Mm-hmm.
And we cannot do it on our own.
And now some women, they see that that's growing too, even among women too. Well, give me some of the things that you would say, since you've been in the United States and been around a lot of different people, traveled a lot, what wisdom have you learned for your own life?
In terms of my Christian walk,
Anything, your business, your walk, your ministry, your sports. What have you learned for Tim? What piece of wisdom have you learned?
I think in all of this so far in my 49 years, I think the one thing that I've clearly seen and known in my heart is to just trust God, to rely on God. I remember one time you were talking about our rent for our apartment, and you had mentioned that you told me, Tim, I remember this clearly,
Really?
Betty. You told me, Tim, you don't need money, you need God, because money will run out, but God will be there for you.
Yeah, and I'll tell you how I learned that. It just came to me one day. You don't need money, you need God. God has money,
Yes.
and He can get it to you.
Yes.
That's a big lesson for people to learn.
Yes, it was actually something that really, it was a shock to hear at first, because in my mind, I need money. But like you said, God, and then from that point on, God slowly changed my heart. And He was teaching me to rely on Him. And there was this one reading that I saw that asked, are you relying on God's blessings? Or are you relying on God?
Wow, and there's a big difference.
Yes.
The blessings can come and go, but
Yes.
God can't. God's eternal and permanent,
Yes.
right?
So that's been the main thing that God has been teaching me, and I've been trying to apply that to my life now. And it's
I really admire that, because I think a lot of men struggle with that. It's part of, I'm a man, I should be able to handle it, I should know what to do,
Yes.
I should have the wisdom.
Yes.
And then you discover there is someone who will help you, and you will be so glad if you will let them.
Yes.
And it's God.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's great. I just thank you for being on this show and being so honest. I thank you for coming to America. We needed you.
Thank you.
I thank you for coming to New York. We needed you here.
Thank you, Betty.
It's been great having you.
Thank you, Betty.
So thank you so much for watching this show. It wasn't an accident that you turned on the TV tonight. And I hope that you received some wisdom you needed. And then I hope you have a great rest of the night. See you next time. Bye.